Hello, and welcome to our inaugural Women in Government Contracting podcast. I'm Tracye Howard. I'm a partner in Wiley's Government Contracts Practice Group, and I'm joined today by my partner, Sacilotto, and our distinguished guest, Emma Sharma, who is the former Chief Administrative Officer, Secretary, and General Counsel of Valiant Integrated Services, and now the founder and principal of Swallowtail Group. As a little background, Wiley started the Women in Government Contracting Group back in 2014 so that women in the government contracting industry had opportunities for networking, mentoring, knowledge sharing, and professional growth. We've previously held mostly in-person events that ranged from Q&As with notable leaders in the industry to community service-oriented events to just networking events. Now, we're pivoting to have a mix of podcasts, some virtual substantive panels, and occasionally still a few in-person events in the future. So welcome, Emma, and thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. It's great to see you ladies again.
Absolutely. So I gave a brief update. Can you just tell us a little about your background, before Valiant?
Yeah, sure. So I started my career about 25 years ago now as a qualified attorney in London. I did my share of working in law firms. And then when I was on secondment to a customer, I realized that probably the in-house world was a better fit for me. So I ended up in-house with Capgemini. And then over the course of the next few years, I spent time in various in-house roles, ending up in Asia as regional general counsel for a major technology firm, before moving to the Middle East and working for Supreme Group, who were a major US government contractor during the Afghanistan campaign. And my role there actually pivoted from being purely legal. I actually joined them to lead their ethics and compliance efforts, building their first ever in-house ethics and compliance team and function. And in time, ended up as their chief ethics and compliance officer and general counsel for the USA business. And that really was the beginning of working for the organization that became Valiant. The story is pretty well known now, but after Supreme settled some fairly major legal issues, they really were considering continuing in the government contracting space. And for lots of reasons that didn't happen. And it gave the opportunity for the management team of Supreme Group USA to purchase the assets that were left and to stand up what became Valiant. So that's the background. It's a whistle-stop tour over 25 years, and I feel really old having just gone through all of that in 2 seconds.
Well, but when you started Valiant, Emma, I mean, you went in not just in a capacity as a lawyer. You're one of the founding members. I mean, you went in as an entrepreneur, starting a whole new government contractor, which to me seems like that's a pretty major leap. So how did you go about it? What made you decide to put on this pretty expansive and possibly risky new role?
So I think the honest truth in relation to Valiant is that really it was an opportunity that presented itself. And for the management team here in the USA was really, are we going to do this? And if we don't, then probably there won't be anything left. So for me, there was a great sense of kind of duty that we owed to the business and to the folks that worked for the company to see if we could pull this thing off. And it helped. I built a really good relationship with the customer. We had great advisors in town who were kind of encouraging that this is not, while this is risky and it's going to be hard, it's possible. And I think what was exciting is we had the opportunity to stand up something not only that hadn't been stood up before and relaunch under a new name, but actually to do it in a way that probably hadn't been done before. There was a lot of unique aspects to this particular transaction. And that was just interesting and exciting. And I'm sure many people listening understand, you can spend years and years in your career and do the same thing day in, day out. And here was just the opportunity to do something different. And it was exciting to be part of it.
So I would imagine that once you took the leap, that it was like to me, I don't know, you tell me if I'm wrong. It seems like it'd be like a fire hose the first few days or first months of standing up a whole new company. I mean, what was it like?
Well, before day one, there were almost 2 years of even trying to make day one happen, right? So there was a fairly lengthy and complex equity raising process where I felt like we must have spoken to every firm out there, every possible investor. We had to build a support network of advisors and bankers and brokers. And I will tell you that most of the way through the process, it wasn't clear that this was actually ever going to happen. There were a lot of complexities to that particular transaction and a lot of reasons why folks would spend time talking with the management team and then decide it wasn't an investment for them. So by the time we actually did launch, I will tell you, I was driving, I was due to be in Disney World, with my children and my husband for a long planned vacation. And of course, we managed to close right in the middle of that. So instead of going to Disney World, we were in Philadelphia dealing with some of the documentation. And I think, to be truthful, day one was almost a state of shock. I remember as we closed over the phone, we were driving south towards Florida to catch the tail end of our vacation. And my husband looked at me and said, "Wow, it's happened." And I think our celebratory meal was off the A95 in the Tuesdays with the worst glass of Chardonnay I've ever had in my life. I remember thinking, this is not how I imagined it would be, celebrating the closure of this deal. But then, of course, you're right. You wake up the next day and what we had purchased were a bunch of assets. We had some contracts, we had a warehouse, we had some racking, and we had a lot to get done. And we had to build a back office from scratch. So those first couple of years were tough. You know, there was the process of contracts novation, which everyone in our industry knows is a nightmare. We had to set up payroll and insurance plans and bank accounts and 401k plans. And I found myself at the center. There were two US-based executives, and I was the one tasked with getting all of that in place. And it was brutal, to be honest, because as lawyers, we think of ourselves as smart people, and I like to think of myself as somewhat smart. But I've never done some of these things before. Yeah. You know, I don't know how to set up a 401k plan and what you need in place for all of those things to be good and effective. And it was a journey, and it was a very humbling journey of realizing that every business, no matter how big it becomes, just has to have some basics in place. And when there is nobody else to do it, you have to go out and do it. So there was a lot of learning, a lot of mistakes, a lot of redoing things when you learnt more information. And then, 6 months later, once we'd actually closed on the second acquisition, ABM Government Services, and we did acquire, some HR people and finance people, which was a huge relief. And then we were able to really start getting out there and building the team that became the backbone of Valiant and grew it to what it is today. So, an exciting journey. Certainly tiring, but really valuable and an immensely exciting learning process.
Wow, that's pretty daunting. I can't even imagine having to figure out the tax part of it.
Yeah.
And then the ERISA part.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it's funny because you realize as an attorney, as an in-house attorney, I've always had, good advisors on speed dial for anything that is not within my wheelhouse. I think I learned there were things I didn't even know I needed to have somebody on speed dial for. And particularly, as you can tell from my accent, I'm not originally from the USA. So, ERISA is a very, that's a whole area that's pretty unique to this nation and the way our legal system works. So, a lot, like I say, very humbling. You have to be really, really quick to spot what you're not an expert in. And I think if you're going to do it properly, you have to be willing to go and get the help rather than trying to muscle through, because otherwise you can make mistakes that are difficult to unpick later.
Yeah, definitely an issue spotting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so after all of that hard work and effort, you decided not to just rest on your laurels, but now you're moving on to Swallowtail. So what made you decide now was the right time to leave?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So Valiant has been around now for nearly 5 years, and it feels like 5 years going on 50 because so much has happened during that time. We've had to do so much, and we've grown the business significantly. I think during that opportunity over those years, I got to know myself really well. Like for the first time with an executive coach that I hired, I would ask myself questions like, what is it that I enjoy about what it is that I do? Or even more fundamental, how am I put together? What kind of personality am I? How do I get joy out of life? And what do I really enjoy? Or maybe what am I uniquely created to spend my time doing? And I will say that this may sound crazy, but once the business was up and running with this phenomenal team that we'd hired, and we were in a pretty steady state of just growing and operating the business, there was a time probably in the last year when it just became less interesting for me. And that's not to say there wasn't still activity that needed to be done, but I could kind of feel this like itching and shaking to move on to the next big thing. And sometimes when you are a business growing and operating in steady state, that opportunity to do the pizzazz bang just isn't there. And it was funny, when I was sat with my coach earlier this year and we were talking through, well, what is this that I'm feeling? She said to me, has it ever occurred to you that at your heart, you're an entrepreneur? Because everything that we'd done, all of the assessments and all of the personality tests said, I think you don't really understand this about yourself, but you love building and creating new things. You love bringing teams together. You enjoy the excitement of the chaos and fixing that mess and bringing it into order. And that's a much more entrepreneurial style than perhaps you've given yourself credit for. And after rejecting it completely and then thinking about it for a while, I realized she was probably right. And of course, what had been happening is all of these ideas had been percolating away over the last year or so. Well, what if I did this? Or what if I did that? Or what if that problem that's out there in the industry was something that could be solved? How would I go about that? And who would I want to do that with? So over the summer, I think I just came to the realization that probably it was time for me to move on. And it wasn't a quick decision or, one of those situations where you have a bad day and you're like, that's it, I'm done. I was really thoughtful about it and had begun to plan for the future and what I might do and put some feelers out there and think about timeframes. And then one day it was just the right day. I remember I was actually on vacation and we had had a few days away. And I just remember a number of things happening outside in the world. I think Afghanistan, the drawdown was kicking off. And I just realized that life is very short. Here I am, I'm coming up for my half a century soon. And there was a sense of, if not now, then when? And if not me, then who? And I realized that, Emma, only you can make this decision for yourself. There's going to be, rather like having children, there's no perfect time and there's no time you can really afford it. But if you're going to do what you were created to do, you better get out and do it. And so it was one of those moments of complete and absolute clarity. And I thought, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to leave and I'm going to get out there and start muscling on my own venture. And it, not necessarily all by myself, but I'm going to get out there and do what it is I feel I really want to do.
So, and I know Swallowtail is you're still in its infancy here, and there's probably not a whole lot you can tell us, but can you give us any hints about what the business is going to be about and what sorts of things you're going to be getting into?
Yeah, sure. It's very much at the exploratory stage, but there is a little group of us looking at forming a women-owned small business, and with a particular eye on a niche area of government contracting that focuses on the advancement of women in developing nations. So, I'm excited about where it could go, but as with all of these things, it's important to be sure there's a real business plan there. There's actually a business there. I think, some of this work lends itself well to NGOs, and that's not what we're really interested in doing right now. So that's what we're exploring.
That sounds super interesting. You talked about your executive coach and the questions you asked yourself. And for people like me and Tracye or other women who are lawyers and thinking about maybe taking a plunge similar to yours, what kind of advice would you hand down to the next Emma Sharma?
So definitely get help. This was not a journey I made by myself. So surround yourself with coaches and mentors and good friends who you can explore the idea of making a change with them, and be very open-minded. I got a lot of help and a lot of support, and it was invaluable. I would also encourage people to think first. Often people focus on the big question, which is, I just can't afford not to make a change, right? I pay the mortgage, I pay the childcare, and that is a very important question, but that is more about the timing than about the what and what if. So park that for a minute and just sit down with a blank piece of paper, maybe over a period of days or weeks, and think about, what really brings you joy. What are you uniquely, if you could do anything in the world uniquely, what would it be? What are my skill sets? What is my vision for my life? What is the purpose I have for my life? That's a big question. And that's sometimes where the coaches can be helpful in helping you unpack that and your personality type. And then with all of that data and the space to do some creative thinking around, well, if I could do anything, what would it be? Would I be a chef? Would I be a sports personality? Would I run a business doing this and this? Or have I ever had one of those great ideas that I've always wondered, if I just pulled the thread, could it go somewhere? I think once you've got all of that data and you've had time to think and you start to focus in on an area that would be of interest to you, I think when you know that, that's when you go back to the practical questions of, okay, well, maybe I can't afford to just quit my job tomorrow and go and do it, but what is the path I build from where I am today to where I would like to be in 2 or 5 years' time? Do I need to go and get educated in an area? Do I need to save some money? Do I need to borrow some money? Do I need to move somewhere different? And then I think you can build that plan that takes you from where you are today to ideally where you'd like to be. And it becomes less about well, I just can't do that, I'm just going to dismiss it, to a real, hey, I am going to do this, and I'm going to do it this way, and I'm going to get there. Build yourself a strategic plan for your life. So I think it's possible for all of us to ultimately end up doing something we find very fulfilling and very enjoyable, and that is uniquely ours to do, if we just think about it for a while and build that plan.
Mm-hmm. The executive coaching that you mentioned, I mean, what is that? I haven't had it. I think I should get it. It sounds really valuable. I mean, what is it? What are they doing for you? What is their mission?
So your executive coach, if they're doing their job properly, they are exactly what the word means. They are your coach. They are there to help you unlock what is inside of you, your purpose, your dreams, your abilities, and they're there to help you discover how you are going to live that out yourself. Good executive coaches, there are many, many people that hold themselves out to be executive coaches. And let me just say, go and get the very best one you can afford to hire, because there is a huge world out there and different abilities and standards, and you want a really good one if you can afford it, because good coaches will come with a whole toolbox of assessments they can help you do and ways to analyze what's going on with you and what you think and feel and who you are, and they'll help you really, they'll ask you tough questions, really tough questions. Sometimes they'll make you cry. But by digging down deep, that's when you really get to the truth of it. So I would certainly say for anyone looking for an executive coach, find someone like me who's had one before and get some recommendations. Interview several coaches. A lot of it is personality. You know, we gel with different people, and you need somebody that you gel with 150%. I mean, it's almost like picking a spouse or a partner. You need to know this is going to work and that they're going to be the right person for you. But I would encourage anyone and everyone who's thinking about a major transition to get that support.
So Emma, we're going to pivot a little bit here. Anyone who has seen your LinkedIn post knows that you post a lot about empathetic leadership. And can you just, for people who don't know what that is, can you summarize it for us and tell us, why is that important to you?
Yeah, sure. So an empathetic leader is one that is a leader who is very aware of the needs, thoughts, and feelings of other people as they lead. And they put that at the core of their leadership. And for me, it's important because actually, I didn't know this, but when I did my Gallup Strength Finders, I realized empathy was my number one strength. And I'd always known there was something a little different about the way I led teams, but I hadn't been able to give it a name, and here was a name. And I think it's really important, however, particularly having, the last 10, 11 years been involved in large transformations, organizational transformations, and large sticky situations within companies and post-mergers. There's a lot of ways you can lead, right? And you can lead through brute force, and you can be very, very focused on results and numbers. And I always say this, results and numbers are always important. But at the end of the day, it's people that get things done. It's people that build the business and deliver those results and numbers. So if you actually focus more than perhaps others do on the people that you are part of your team, who you are relying on to get things done, I personally believe and have observed you're going to be far more successful than if you just approach it with a pure mechanical numbers approach. And I think that the world is seeing, particularly in light of this awful pandemic that we're still living through, that the issues relating to people have come right to the top. So we spend a lot of time talking and thinking about our workforces. How do we support them and continue to support them through these difficult times? How do we make sure that they're not overwhelmed by events, maybe as moms, overwhelmed by childcare and schooling and leaving the workforce in droves? And I think as leaders, if we can focus on the people that we have on our teams and what they need, we're going to be more successful in keeping that team intact and driving to better results in the future. So I do feel it's an area of business leadership, business management, theory, whatever you want to call it, that's coming into its own as we've had to walk through something difficult as a global marketplace, really.
Yeah, I suspect that some people talk about empathetic leadership, but it's probably more truthy if you see it in action. And so I'm just wondering, if you can provide some examples of the kind of actions that, demonstrate more than just lip service to empathetic leadership, but a real commitment.
Well, I think like anything, if you really say that you do something or that you care about something, you will make the tough decisions, even when sometimes you may feel that it's financially more expedient to do something else. And, the whole discussion about where we work and how we work and the amount of flexibility that we afford to people, I think that's been one of those situations where you can see companies who are saying, yeah, we want everyone to work at home because, quite frankly, we don't want the liability of lawsuits if people get sick. I think that's a very traditional view of, we make it look about the people, but it's really about something else. However, there are also firms who are sat down saying, look, we've got moms and dads who have been trying to homeschool. We've got people who have got underlying health conditions. We actually know that these 2 years have been pretty grueling on people, and we're going to create a more flexible working environment that allows people to breathe. And we expect them to do their job. We expect them to give their best, but they're much more likely to do that if we're taking care of them and giving them a few tools that make it easier for them to do that. So that's one, I would say. That to me is an example. And then the other is in the whole area of wellness. Again, wellness programs can cost money. I would argue in the long run, you can actually show that they save you money. But let's just start with the budget decision, to spend money on a wellness program. That really does say, if you invest in a true wellness program and you bring in folks who can help your workforce to find ways to take better care of themselves, to manage stress better, to get some good discipline into their personal lives, while that may require an investment on your part, it also says, hey, we really care about you. We want to see you thrive in every way, not just in what you deliver in the workplace, but actually we want to see you thrive as a person. We want to see you healthy and stress-free, and maybe even paid to take some leave so you can spend your time with your family. And underlying all of that, obviously, you hope that these happy, well, productive people will deliver great results for your business. But there's something more to it than that. It's something about, regardless of that, for a moment, we care about you as a human being. And I think the more of that starts to come through, you're going to see a real transformation in workplaces where that view is actually given the space to breathe.
Yeah, the legal industry as a whole, just because we are lawyers too, is struggling with that issue. All of the surveys have been that lawyers tend not to score high on the wellness scale, and a lot of efforts have been made, including, at our firm and firms across the country. And I think they're great. I like to read about that kind of thing, not just with lawyers, but in the workplace, and beyond just the money aspect of it, in an environment where the labor market is so volatile, so many people are leaving their positions and changing course in life like you, a wellness program is not just, good business sense, maybe monetarily, but retention, right?
Yep.
Because then people feel like, their employer cares about them, and it's a environment where you want to work.
Yep, absolutely.
And I know that I read all the wellness things like that our firm sends out. We get one once a week. And they're great. I love them. So I'm a big fan of those kinds of efforts across the board.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is just about connection. So I know, I'm a pretty social person, and I've always been a strong connector with my team, but I was particularly focused during the pandemic, making sure that we really did connect. And so we would have calls that were not to talk about work at all. We would just share pictures of each other's dogs and maybe even show the dog on camera and have people really just talk about how they were doing. And I actually do think that one of the nicest, or perhaps one of the best outcomes of this pandemic is we actually have started to ask people how they really are. And that has allowed people, perhaps for the first time, to share some of the realities of what goes on for them, some good and some not so good. And I will tell you, during the pandemic, I spoke to people at all times of the day and night, some of whom were struggling with really dark issues. And a couple of times I even sat with someone while we called 911 and got them help. And that would never have happened in the past, because we wouldn't have been intentionally, I wouldn't have opened the doorway to say, if you're having a dark moment and you feel like life may not be worth living, you call me and we're going to talk about that. And it's an immense privilege to sit with someone when they're in that kind of a space and just be with them at probably the darkest moment of their life and help them through it, be part of helping them through it. And that's the kind of thing I think that makes a difference.
Yeah, well, that is empathetic leadership right there. I don't think you could come up with a better example. So thanks for sharing that with us. This has been wonderful, Emma. It's always a delight to talk to you. It has been too long since we've spoken, and I am so excited for your next journey. Swallowtail Group sounds like it's a great mission that you're exploring, and so I thank you for your time, and thanks, Tracye, for joining me. Like Tracye said, we're going to be doing a series of podcasts and webinars for our Women in Government Contracting Group. And hopefully we'll be able to have a live event soon. Until then, thank you, Emma. Thank you, Tracye. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.